In the summer of 1940, Europe had fallen. Paris was occupied, and only one island still stood free. Britain was alone against the full power of Nazi Germany and its allies. Every week, German bombers drew closer to London. U-boats prowled the Atlantic, strangling trade routes. The last of Britain's allies were gone. And yet the British refused to surrender. They had a plan, bold, desperate, and ingenious. A plan to defeat Hitler without ever setting foot on the European mainland. How did Britain intend to win a war while standing alone against the entire continent? Let's find out. In the middle of 1940, Britain faced Germany, Italy, and their allies with no one left to help. The Axis powers had conquered nearly all of Europe, leaving the United Kingdom as the final bastion of freedom in the West. But despite the hopeless odds, the British leadership still had a strategy to survive and even to win. While France was still fighting, London's plan was simple. It repeated what had worked during the First World War. The English Channel acted as a natural shield against invasion, and the Royal Navy made any direct landing on the islands nearly impossible. By heavily patrolling and mining the North Sea from the Orkney and Shetland Islands all the way to Norway, Britain aimed to block all supplies going into Germany. This would choke the German economy, protect British shipping, and buy time for the Empire and its dominions to build up their strength before returning to the continent. In the 1920s and 30s, however, the British Army had been drastically downsized. The horrors of the Great War were still fresh, and no one wanted to see millions of young men buried in trenches again. Instead, the military strategy shifted toward machines, tanks, artillery, and mobility, reducing dependence on sheer manpower. When the war began, Britain returned to its plan of expansion. The envisioned full army, around 60 to 70 divisions, required enormous resources to equip and train. The idea was to hold the line with France until this grand army was ready. But then France fell. With the collapse of the French defense, Britain now faced the full force of Nazi Germany alone. German submarines operating from Atlantic and Mediterranean ports expanded their deadly reach across vast waters. British cities came under relentless bombardment by the Luftwaffe. Britain had to change its entire strategy overnight. The war could no longer be fought on foreign soil. If the British failed, the next battles would be on their own shores. The Royal Air Force and Navy became the nation's top priority. They were the shield that kept Britain alive, and the sword that could still strike back. The army evacuated from Dunkirk, battered but not broken, formed the core of a smaller, more mobile force, 35 divisions instead of 60. To compensate, Britain poured resources into producing tanks, planes, and weapons, enough to arm 55 divisions and supply resistance groups across occupied Europe. The focus was no longer on massive numbers, but on efficiency and technology. British divisions were heavily mechanized, each with around 18,000 soldiers and 4,000 trucks, compared to Germany's 12,000 to 15,000 troops and only 700 trucks. German forces still relied on slow horse-drawn wagons, while British units could move fast and strike harder. This approach favored quality over quantity. Britain's long-term strategy became indirect yet deliberate. Supporting resistance movements, launching fast amphibious and airborne raids, and exhausting the enemy through constant harassment, all while maintaining a naval blockade and air superiority. The goal was to wear Germany down through years of attrition, weakening its resources and morale. Ultimately, once the enemy was stretched thin and vulnerable, the fully prepared British and Imperial forces would return to Europe in a decisive invasion, delivering the final blow initially. This was projected for 1942 or 1943. But the war evolved rapidly. The entry of Japan, then the Soviet Union and the United States, shifted priorities and timelines. Forecasts became meaningless. Yet it's important to note that Britain's core strategy had been shaped independently of both the USSR and the US. At first, London saw the Soviet Union as unreliable, a nation that had invaded Finland, purged its own army, and helped partition Poland. And while American involvement was always desirable, it couldn't be the foundation of Britain's survival plan. In the end, Britain's strategy was a careful balance between victory and survival, a modern revival of the Napoleonic-era approach, waging economic warfare from the sea against a land-based power, encouraging revolts in occupied territories, and preserving Britain's forces until the moment came for a crushing counter-strike. When the enemy was finally exhausted, Britain's smaller but highly trained army would land, advance, and deliver the decisive defeat. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you found this video interesting, subscribe and like to join us on more explorations of history's pivotal moments.